don't forget to talk about Johnny T-shirt.
I got it, man. I got Johnny.
Okay.
Johnny's
And
my guy.
JohnnyT-shirt.com.
Oh, we're on. We're on. Welcome into Inside Carolina's Game Plan Podcast. I'm Tommy Ashley. That's Jason, Johnny T-shirt, Staples. That's Greg Barnes. We're sponsored by Johnny T-shirt and Congruity. Guys, we're going to talk football tonight. We're not going to talk about all the crap that's happened over the last week.
What?
Though it is. Come on, Greg. Oh, Greg wants to get it out, Greg. Greg Barnes wrote a.
Hey, you were running the show, Tommy.
Greg Barnes wrote an unbelievable column this week. Adam Smith has done some great work reporting. So if you want to know about the drama, you can go read the drama. There has been. I don't think so. I think it's just par for the course.
Isn't this just Carolina football, the Carolina way?
Carolina plays a football game Saturday. You can see the scroll at the bottom. North Carolina at Duke, Saturday, 4 p.m., ESPN2. And tickets are rapidly dropping on StubHub. You don't have to pay the $95 that the Rams Club offered them at. I'll come to you, Greg. I did entitle this show More Than a Rivalry Game. I think this game is much more than the victory bell as well. And that sort of hints at the issues that Carolina has faced. But Carolina and Duke, always a fun one, Greg.
It really has been. And Mack has had a lot of success against Duke over the years. I know everybody has the 41 zip photo kind of implanted in their brain from, what was that? It was 89, 88 with Spurrier. But really since then, Mack has owned the Blue Devils. And Duke has actually had some pretty good teams the last several years. And granted, there have been some competitive games. But it's really been a rivalry. For a while there, Duke just was not putting any kind of effort into their football program. And there were some pretty lopsided games. But even during that time period, Tommy, I know you covered a few of them, there were some really good games. And this is a true sneaky rivalry game. Everybody focuses on NC State for good reason. This game goes back a long ways. And while the passion is really rooted in the basketball series, there's a lot of it on the gridiron as well. And that makes it fun. And that's why this game, I think, for a lot of people, we were looking at this previous to last week as the first true measuring stick for North Carolina this year. Maybe you can throw Minnesota into the mix there. But at least you've figured out what this team was going to do in ACC play. This was the first true test because while Duke has had some good teams, especially under Mike Elko, a lot of change the last year. Manny Diaz coming in and a lot of changes with the roster. So what would Duke be like? And clearly they're rebuilding a bit. And they've done a pretty good job thus far this year. They haven't really played any tough competition, but they've excelled where they've needed to and have done a pretty solid job, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So it's a big game for North Carolina. We can get into the ramifications of it beyond just the rivalry. I think this is a very big game for Mack Brown after what happened last weekend. But look, this is ACC play. There's no more gimmies. I thought last week may be somewhat of a gimme. It clearly was not. So here we are, and there's no doubt all these games that remain will be competitive contests.
Yeah, interesting stat. I'm going to steal it from Jason because I told it to him, and I'm afraid he's going to use it. Duke scored 26 points in each of their first 3 games and has also scored 26 points in the fourth quarter of this season. Some scorigami stuff going on.
So which one do you think is going to happen against Carolina this week? Will they score 26 or are they going to score 26 in the fourth quarter?
For the record, I've already picked my score.
I already got mine down too.
Yeah, but, so I don't know what's going to happen. If they score 26, I think Carolina wins the game. But Jason, the locker room after the game we've discussed ad nauseum. But I want to talk about the prep for this game. Is last week something you can just wash the stink off as a player and get ready? Does it help that it's a rivalry game? Does it help that it's Manny Diaz, the young coach, defensive coordinator that was fired after a poor performance? by the current head coach of North Carolina, the head coach of Miami that saw Carolina absolutely destroy them several years ago down there in Hard Rock. I mean, does all that help Carolina refocus? Where do you think the heads are at right now in Chapel Hill? Because as Greg says, we hadn't heard from any of them.
It's really hard to know because the responses to, I mean, you're dealing with this situation that's, I don't know if I'd call it unprecedented, but it's not the norm for what these guys, for what, college teams in general deal with. So, I mean, it could be any number of things. They could right now be circling the wagons and, ready to come out with a lot more preparation and intensity than they've brought at any point. It's possible. It's also possible that, guys are starting to look around and going, what now? So I don't think we can really know the answer to that question until about the end of the first quarter of this game. We're going to know a lot about this football team at the end of the first quarter of this football game. And I think we're going to know a lot about this team and really where things are going by the end of this game. This has been the one that for me has been circled in a lot of ways as a game where it's going to tell the tale of kind of what this team is going to decide to be this year. I've thought that since before the season. We're going to find out who they are this game. Last game really didn't change my opinion on that. And actually, I think they're being candid. I think last week wound up being a bit of a trap game for them, given that I think in the building, I think they probably were thinking of this game as the real measuring stick that they needed to focus on. And they got pantsed by the team before them. So I don't think we really can know, but I think we're going to know a whole lot more coming out of this game.
Greg, you've covered them a long time. You've covered sports a long time, and I'm trying to wrap. Is getting beat twice by the same team a real thing? Jason obviously agrees, and I guess you're going to agree here. But the point I made earlier is having a rivalry game, having a game that people look. Duke and Carolina do not get along on the football field. They may know each other, but as Buck likes to point out in his columns, at some point, some time ago, they did a rivalry hatred scale or whatever ranking, and Duke Carolina football was way up the food chain because it's just a nasty game usually. I've never seen. I think it was Kent One Balmer after a game I covered. I thought that guy was going to rip somebody's head off in the locker room or in the post game because he was so pissed at the antics that went on during that game. But Greg, your take here on not only the importance of the game to know where Carolina is, but Jason's point about the first quarter. I mean, do we know that soon, or is it a 60-minute test to see where this program is?
Yeah, well, I think both, to be honest, because they were not prepared against James Madison in any phase of the game. And there was situations in that game where players were not putting forth effort. Jason did a good job highlighting some of those. That's a problem. And yes, you can kind of write it off maybe they kind of overlooked them. I don't know how many times we've had this conversation. What about this program in the last 15 years gives anybody any suggestion that they can overlook anybody? I don't get it. I don't get it.
And just to be clear, it's not a Mack Brown thing. It's
right.
Not a Larry Fedora thing. It's not a John Bunning thing. It is a institutional thing with Carolina football. We have seen it, and maybe other teams are just like that. In fairness, we cover this one, and to your point, Greg,
we know other teams are not like that because the numbers of double-digit favorites that lose games, that number has stood basically still nationally within conference, all of those things. That number is what it is, and it's pretty stable. It's been stable for 20 some years. there's an enormous, massive outlier out here that is Carolina when it comes to that number. I mean, how many times, Greg, have you gone into that? I mean, you could probably recite that one from memory, right?
Yeah.
Do it,
So,
Greg.
I mean,
Do it.
yeah, go for it. The normal, the average rate in the country for teams over the past, 20 years or whatever, that are double-digit favorites that lose a game is what?
Well, teams that are favored by 7 win 70% of the time. Carolina, let's see here. They have won.
I can just pull your tweet, Greg.
Yeah. So Carolina is winning 58% of the time when they're a double-digit favorite.
And that is usually a 80 some percent.
Typically, a two-touchdown favorite wins about 80% of the time.
And
Yeah.
just to pour a little more salt in there, how many of those teams actually lose by double digits?
Well, I
The
don't know
bottom
that
line
number.
is
Carolina's lost 4 times though.
getting back to your point there. The discussion that we're having now, we've had far too many times. So what needs to change, if it can change? Because it's not the current administration that's causing it. It is something much deeper than that.
Yeah, and it's the whole culture conversation, and we could have a whole show about that, and that's kind of more of an off-season thing. But kind of getting back to your question, given what transpired on Saturday, both with the embarrassment of the loss and then the locker room situation, this is a very important game for the program as a whole, but especially for Mack Brown. Because, with North Carolina circling the wagons the way they have, which is fine, whatever you feel like you need to do, but not allowing players to talk after the game and not allowing them to talk this week leading up to a rivalry game, that kind of shows some effort to kind of control the narrative, control what's being pushed out. And what you want to have happen is after you endure that week of criticism, you come out on Saturday and you play gangbusters. You smack Duke early and you ride out of Wallace Wade with the victory. And if you play well and you win, well, then you can really just brush off and say, hey, it was a bad week. It was emotional. It's not how we should be. But look, we looked good against Duke. We won. We're ready. We're past it. We're done. And you can make that argument until, of course, Pitt comes to town. But if that doesn't happen and Carolina doesn't look good, even if Carolina somehow manages to win, but they don't look good doing it, there's going to be those lingering question marks. And I think that's the concern. And especially if Carolina comes out early after they looked so unprepared against James Madison and they don't look good in the first quarter and Duke's able to jump on them a little bit. I mean, you know what the message boards are going to be like. You know what social media is going to be like. And then it's going to be fighting against that the rest of the game. And so I think it's important for them to come out, look solid, look poised early, look together, look enthusiastic. I mean, that was lacking against James Madison. All those things. And so that's a big challenge. That's a big test for the coaching staff and for the team to put all those pieces together after a tumultuous week.
All right, I'm going to post something up here, and then we're going to get to the game. Love how Tommy said they were talking about football, and they hadn't even talked about the game yet.
Well, I will say one more thing before we move on, and that is I do suspect, regardless of whatever else happens, that this is going to be a fairly fragile team coming into this game. So that's why I'm highlighting the start. The first quarter is going to matter a lot in this game, because if they come out and they play ball and they get some momentum in that first quarter, that can go a long way to helping forget what just happened. If Duke comes out and goes up 10-0 in the first quarter, that there's going to be a lot of doubt that's going to creep into some minds.
Here's an interesting thing in the chat. Florida Gators Ole Miss moment. Wasn't that Tebow going out there and saying we're going to play? I mean, it's Florida, so I understand your consternation there. Jason.
It's
But that
also
was
it's also one of the. It might be it. That's the team that NFL scouts have for years referred to as Thug U. Like
yeah.
that was the worst character team maybe in NCAA history. It was the 2009 or 2010 Florida team was probably the worst, but the
Yeah, I
'08
mean,
team was bad.
but they made Netflix series and they had a serial killer maybe on that year. I can't remember which year.
Yeah,
But
they
the
did.
point
It was Aaron Hernandez.
but the point remains is that they came out and played, and Carolina plays Duke. So Jason, let's talk about the game specifically. Greg mentioned enthusiasm, effort. What will show you say Duke has success? How does one team have success against another team and it not be a function of not being prepared or not being fully engaged or max effort? What does that look like so people can understand the difference? And somebody's question in the chat mentions Rucker, but I was going to say Rucker would have been a good guy to have that discussion, even though he's not available and hadn't been available. But we didn't hear from the players, so we don't know what they're thinking. We'll find out at 4:00. But Jason, what does that look like when you first come out? That you play well, you're fired up, and all that stuff. You can still lose, but at least you looked engaged. What's the difference there? If that's a question. It was long.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. I mean, are you asking like, okay, so you lose but you look better? Is that like a moral victory? I'm not sure exactly where
No,
you're
no,
going
no,
with
no.
this.
Like, okay, the game starts. How do you know Carolina's fully engaged and fully prepared, not impaired, prepared? How are you watching when you watch this first quarter? What tells you that, hey, this team's ready to play? This team's prepared by the coaching staff. What are you looking for in that regard?
So for me, I've always my bellwether for those things has been coverage units on special teams and how many hats get to the football on defense. So I want to watch. So and then the third thing would be watching the defensive line get off the ball. So are guys getting off the ball and getting off blocks on the defensive line? So when you see when you see a defensive line get kind of stood up and then they just kind of their feet stop and they just do that, that's a bad sign. When you see a defensive line, a guy initially gets blocked and he looks like he looks like you put a tantruming 2-year-old in a straitjacket and he's doing everything he can to get out of it. That's a good sign, right? That's somebody freaking out, making sure that they go full Tasmanian devil, for the old Looney Tunes folks out there. For you young folks, it's something we older folks used to do on Saturday mornings. But it's how most people our age got introduced to classical music. But anyway, so that's one thing I'm looking at, and then I'm looking at hats to the football. So they throw a perimeter screen. Am I seeing one guy make the tackle, or two guys with kind of an angle, and a guy goes down, and those are the guys in the screen, or am I seeing a guy getting to the football, forcing it, and then I'm seeing 6 guys show up in the screen, and jumping over the pile, running to it, all of that. I want to see that. And on coverage teams, am I seeing guys seeking out contact and getting to the football with a bad attitude? That's stuff that I'm looking at that sets the tone for a football team. And everything beyond that, I've long been of the view that offenses, in terms of mentality, in terms of that sort of thing, take their cues, take their attitude in large measure from the defense and special teams. Now, there is a certain sense if you're physical on offense and you run the football and all that, that can kind of carry over. But I do think that like the direction, the momentum of games very much gets determined by the defensive side of the ball.
Greg, your question. Same question. What do you need to see straight out of the gate that maybe Jason didn't mention, or if you want to piggyback like y'all always do in predictions?
I want to see that they want to be out there, that they're interested in playing, and that they're giving it their all. I mean, Jason's exactly right. I mean, it's do you play just enough up to the whistle, or are you like teetering on that brink of doing a little too much? Because that's where you want to be. It's almost like you're having to restrain yourself from being so excited and so ramped up. That's what you want to be able to see. And you see, I mean, this is not difficult. I mean, everybody who has watched college football, you see the games where teams are just juiced, right? I think the Clemson NC State game last weekend is a great example. Yes, Clemson has more talent, but go watch the first quarter of that game. Clemson, it was a completely different team than what NC State was, not just from a talent perspective. Like those guys were psyched out of their minds. Mm-hmm. And that's why they dominated NC State early. Yes, it helps that you have more talent, but they wanted it more. I mean, it was a will thing, a want to thing. And that's what it is. And you can see that kind of stuff. How hard are they playing? How hard do they want it? How much do they want it? So
I don't think it's a talent. I don't think you need talent to play hard.
You don't.
What you got, Jason?
You want to see strain. You want to see guys, chomping at the bit. You want to see them. And I like what you were saying about stepping up to the boundary of penalties, that sort of thing, of playing, we all had a tradition where I come from of playing through the echo of the whistle. You heard that one said before. I still, you can't quite do that to the degree that old school teams did. Yeah, there you go, Jim. Jim Woodall saying play. See, for us, it wasn't play to the echo; it was play through the echo of the whistle, is what we were told. And you can't do it to the degree that those older school teams did now, because it'll be flagged much more readily. But at the same point, I am of the view that you can have too few penalties.
Mm-hmm. You can have too few penalties.
You can have too few penalties. You don't want to be the least penalized team in the country.
Because that means you're not a bunch of them jumping off sides type penalties.
Right.
You're talking about
you want the right kind of penalties. Like you want the occasional personal foul. You want the occasional roughing the passer. You don't actually want any of them in their situation. But if you're the least penalized team in the country, it means you're not playing close enough to the edge. You want to be toward the middle of those standings. You don't want to be the most penalized team, and you don't want a bunch of holding penalties, procedure penalties, pre-snap penalties. You want zero for that stuff. But you absolutely want some, what coaches, they might not tell their players this, but coaches will call them effort penalties. You want the penalty where the guy's straining to get hold of the quarterback and happens to hit him, as the foot's stepping out of bounds, that sort of thing. Okay, well, I'd rather you take the shot sometimes. Officials blowing a guy dead as the fifth guy gets there in the tackling situation. Yeah, it's not great in that situation, but that tells me that how my team's playing, and I can live with that. So you want a little bit of that.
And you want to hit somebody when you get a penalty, right? You don't want to have a penalty not punishing somebody on it.
Well, it's like in basketball. And you guys can cross that one off your bingo card. It's like in basketball, right? If you're going to foul them, get your money's worth, right? Yeah. Make them feel it.
You're not making the basket. You're going to pick up off the floor.
Jordan rules, baby.
Oh, yeah, that's another thing people talk about these pro players today. Good God, go back and watch some of the Jordan games where he just got beat to death and still managed. Anyway, I'll get off that soapbox in a hurry.
But he also had a ton of space to work with because of the way that they did things, and they just gave him open
Dude,
jumpers.
He would average 60 points a game. Prime Jordan would average 60 points a game right now.
Not in today's era.
Yes, he would. He would average at least 50. All right, this is the Game Plan podcast. We're talking about Duke Carolina.
Close.
We're going to have
with the new zone defense rules and all that. Teams would zone the heck out of him. They'd force the ball out of his hands instead of allowing him to drive on one-on-one all the time. Because you remember, the illegal defense rule in that era benefited one-on-one players.
Step in here.
Today's players are not benefited as much to play one-on-one. In today's era, he'd have to shoot better to average that kind of number.
He would shoot 30 free throws a game in today's era. Game plan. Focus, Jason.
Where are you at on this, Greg?
I think as we get older as a species and we play more sports and whatever else we do, we get better, and that's for a variety of
That's a good
different
answer.
reasons. But look at like marathon times, any kind of race times, you're always setting new records because we adjust, we adapt, we get better. And
You find guys like Giannis Antetokounmpo and
Yada
from
yada
Greece.
yada. Let's talk. Look, we're getting people
There
shouting.
weren't as
about
many of those
football.
guys in there.
there was none of those. It was Bill Lambier. Come on.
Yeah,
These
Jim
young
is
people.
right though that Jordan would average 50 against Carolina's football defense.
See, y'all have to get that in. We're talking to Jason Staples and Greg Barnes on the NBA. No, excuse me, the Game Plan podcast, Carolina and Duke Saturday. I'm gonna go ahead and do the Johnny T-shirt stuff because we're going to talk about the game specifically and the matchups. Johnny T-shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com. Places you can get all the Carolina gear you need. Basketball season's around the corner. They're practicing. They've got a scrimmage. You can go to the casino and see Carolina play basketball up in Cherokee. And you can see them play Memphis and all in October. I mean, it is already here, and Johnny T-shirt can outfit you for that. JohnnyT-shirt.com and Johnny T-shirt on East Franklin Street. National guys pay the bills. Game plan. Okay. Can we talk no. Can we talk football now? Jason, before we got started,
Not basketball season yet, Tommy.
I know, really. I'm already thinking about it because it'll be here before you know it.
Well,
But
after that last game, I don't blame you, Tommy.
Carolina gave up more points in the first half against James Madison than they gave up in any first half last season in basketball. Just for relevancy purposes. Greg, Duke is 4-0. They haven't played anybody. Northwestern, probably the best team they played. Your thoughts on this Duke team and what Manny Diaz has been able to do? They lost a fair amount either to the league or in the portal, and Diaz has come and they're 4-0. Carolina's not 4-0, and the schedules aren't much different. But what have you seen from Duke that you think this could be an interesting game on Saturday? And Manny Diaz certainly has the revenge factor going on.
Yeah, for sure. A couple things here in F plus, which is the combination of FEI, which is the points advantage for advanced metrics, and then SP plus, Bill Connolly's system, which is more efficiency, explosive based. Duke ranks 46 nationally. North Carolina is number 47. So these teams are very evenly matched. And part of that is, as you mentioned, Duke has not played anybody of note. They have not played a top 60 team in F plus. They are 4-0 against teams outside the top 60. Carolina, of course, is 0-1 against top 50 teams. JMU being that lone top 50 team, and then Minnesota, I guess, ranks 52nd, and that's it for there. It's a unique setup with what Duke has, because when you look at the staff that Manny Diaz put together, you're kind of like, I mean, are they just going bottom of the barrel trying to save money? Jonathan, I don't even know how to pronounce his name, Patke, the defensive coordinator. He was a quality control assistant at Miami. He was linebackers coach the last 4 years. And then he gets the DC job at Duke. Then you have Jonathan Brewer, who was offensive quality analyst for Manny when he was at Miami. And then he was a quarterbacks coach at SMU and Rhett Lashley last year. And these guys just don't have any coordinator experience. And yet, when you look at what the defense has done thus far, they've been really good. And granted, yes, they hadn't played anybody of note. But one of the interesting things when we talk about the advanced metrics, Duke ranks 82nd in offense, but they're 27th in defense. Carolina, conversely, is 25th offensively, 71st defensively. And Duke's had a better number with special teams thus far. So while there's some differences there, it's really a strength versus strength, weakness versus weakness type setup. And I think that's important to note. And, I think Manny Diaz has done a good job this year. And a key component of that, of course, and we can dive into this more, but is getting Malik Murphy from Texas. and was a big time recruit when he was signed by Texas. It was a big deal for Manning to be able to pull him in. The kid has a live arm, and I think that's going to be a true test. And he may be the difference maker in this game on Saturday.
Jason, I was going to go Duke defense first, but let's stay with Malik Murphy. I mean, we talked about it. He's 64%, 1,000 yards, 4 interceptions against 11 touchdowns. He's huge, but he doesn't run. He's got 2 yards, sack adjusted. And he's with sacks, he's minus 25 yards rushing on the season. So he's not going to scare you, at least with those stats, like maybe Alonzo Martin did last week. But what does Murphy bring? Everybody hears Texas. Everybody hears 4 or 5-star recruit guy. What does he bring to the table that could be troublesome for this North Carolina defense, especially after last week?
Well, the guy can basically throw a ball through a wall. He throws a really pretty football. I mean, if there's a guy that throws a prettier spiral, prettier ball in college football, ball coming out of his hand, there aren't many. And he can locate the ball. I mean, he's thrown with some accuracy. If you're interested, go and watch, for example, the go-ahead touchdown that he threw in overtime against Northwestern. That ball was absolutely placed on a tough throw on like a skinny post where the receiver is pretty well covered. He's capable of making the wow throw.
He threw a back shoulder touchdown pass last week against Middle Tennessee State that was NFL worthy. It was very impressive.
Yeah, he makes 5 or 6 just NFL wow throws per game. The back shoulder on the goal line that he had against Northwestern as well, that was second overtime. That back shoulder was, again, you cannot place that. You can't time it and place it any better. I mean, the corner wasn't even close because of where that ball was placed. And the receiver ran a good route, but I mean, you couldn't put a ball in a better spot if you ran out there and handed it to him. And so the ability to throw with velocity, to throw with a combination of touch and velocity, and place the ball, he flashes at times elite throwing capacity. Now, he'll have his miss or two. He's thrown an interception in every game, and sometimes he's wrong with where he wants to go with it, and every so often he'll overthrow a ball, or he can throw it through a wall, and sometimes he'll just throw it through the space that he's supposed to. But he's by far the best thrower that they've played this year, and I mean, going back through last year's schedule, I'm not sure they played a thrower that was quite as advanced as him last year. I'm thinking through it. There maybe 1 or 2 guys on last year's schedule that were comparable throwers. So he's capable of doing stuff as a passer, as a thrower of the football, that you've got to respect on every snap.
Yeah, and like I said, he is a big young man, so getting him on the ground is going to be a challenge. Running game, Jordan Waters went to NC State. I wonder how he's feeling about that. I guess he got a bag to do it, so maybe he's all right. But Greg, Duke's running game got Star Thomas. He's got 331 yards on the season. He has he's lost some, so he's got 314. But how does Duke attack this North Carolina offense? I mean, is it the Murphy show, or is it
Yes.
a well-rounded game for Duke?
I think that's really the issue for Duke, is they don't have many options at running back. Star Thomas is a kid they got from New Mexico State, who had a pretty good career there before he transferred over. But that's really it. They've tried to use Jordan Moore a little bit in space to kind of make up for that. But Jordan Moore is more of a down the field type wide receiver, and he's really about he's the primary wide receiving option that they have. So they don't have a lot of threats at the skill positions. And they've had some drops. So, yeah, I think it's a situation where if you're North Carolina, you want to bottle up the run, make sure that they're not able to provide Malik Murphy some throwing time, because what he has shown, and he's a young guy. This is his first year starting, but he has shown that when he has time, he can hurt you for the reasons that Jason just laid out. But because he's young and because he's inexperienced and because he doesn't have the best skill position options, he hasn't been great under pressure. So if you look at the numbers, PFF, when he's kept clean, he has a 90.2 offensive grade kept clean. Completing adjusted completion percentage 77.5, throwing for 943 yards.
Those are solid numbers.
7.7 yards per attempt, 9 touchdowns, 1 INT, 6 big time throws versus 1 turnover worthy play. Under pressure, it's 41.2. So that's a big gap there, and he's completing 20% of his passes, 73 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 INTs. Now, the thing is this: he's only been put under pressure on 25 dropbacks. So less than 17% of his snaps when he's throwing the ball has he been put under pressure.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Actually, I've got some numbers on this that are worth going to.
Let me say this too. Hold on a second. Let me say this. People, before anybody says, why did he leave Texas if he's so good? Go check Texas's quarterback room with some dude named Manning and some dude named Ewers. Anyway, Jason, sorry to step on it.
They had an embarrassment of wealth in the quarterback room last year at Texas. They still do. So I was looking through pressure comparisons in preparation for this show, looking at defensive pressure rate produced versus offensive pressure rate given up. Both Carolina and Duke are sort of middle of the pack in defensive pressure rate produced. So in the ACC, Duke is number 8, having produced 33.5% pressure defensively. And Carolina is number 9, having produced 33.1%. It's almost identical pressure rates on the season. There's a pretty big difference, though, on the offensive side. And this is where, Greg, you beat me to it, because it's actually a pretty significant difference. They're just under 17% pressure rate, and the spreadsheet just stopped loading. But they're just under 16.8% quarterback pressure rate given up, which is number 1 in the conference. Then number 2 is Georgia Tech. Number 3 is Miami. North Carolina is 13th. North Carolina has given up 33.8% pressure rate. That's a pretty big difference. So Duke 16.8, Carolina 33.8. By the way, the worst in the conference is Florida State at 41.5% pressure rate, which is no bueno, as one might say. That's Wake Forest is at 38.7, but Florida State's got a full three percentage points worse than that. So, or 2.8%. So not quite threefold, but that 16.8% quarterback pressure rate is going to be, to me, that's the key to this game. If Carolina is going to win this game, it's going to be because they were able to put pressure on Duke in a way that teams so far on Duke's schedule, which they've not played anybody on defense with a pulse, nobody yet has really pressured them. Can Carolina pressure them enough? Because if they do, that's where Murphy's flaws start to come out, like you said. If that pressure rate is 20% or below coming out of this game, Carolina probably lost this football game.
Jason, when you don't have a guy like Kamon Rucker, who's obviously your best pass rusher, and you've struggled to get production from your other options, I know Bo Atkinson's probably the best of the bunch with that. Do you have to kind of create pressure more so than maybe you want just to be able to affect Murphy in this game?
I think so. I mean, you hope that you can get pressure with 4. You hope you can do that in every game. And the question is, can you find? To me, like if I'm, and I know Jeff Collins does a lot of this as well. To me, if I'm coming in as a coordinator into any given game and I want to produce pressure, The first question I'm asking is there a matchup on their offensive line where I can identify a weak spot where I can create a one-on-one matchup in the situations that I want, where my guy's just going to whip their guy? Now, if you've got a Cayman Rucker, that's easier to do. You basically say, okay, third down, I want to put Rucker over this offensive guard because I don't think this guard can block him. And so I'm going to move him inside here, and I'm going to have Atkinson on the outside, or I'm going to play around with my front because I want that. I want that matchup. I don't think that guy can block my guy. You say, oh, that their right tackle can't block my edge if I get one-on-one. And so then what you do is you construct it so that you stunt, you align in certain ways that guy's going to be left on an island. That's what you do. And this, by the way, there's been some discussion lately about why the NFL is down in points. This actually is one of the reasons. Defenses have gotten so good at attacking protections and creating the one-on-ones that they want that they're able to cause tackles for loss. They're able to cause problems for quarterbacks, and it's gotten more difficult, and they're forcing quarterbacks to check down a lot more. So this is what you try to do. If you can't do that, if you say, okay, they're all solid, I'm not sure any of my guys is able to win one-on-one, that's when you start to say, I got to bring an extra guy. That's when you say, okay, well, can I get there with 5? And if I bring 5, which is the guy, where's the one-on-one that I'm creating with 5 that I feel like I can win with? And so that's what you're doing in your game planning process. The question is, they haven't really shown a whole lot of weakness up front yet, partly because nobody's exposed it. Nobody's had the players to expose it yet. So I think there's a little bit of learning on the fly that you're going to have in this game in that aspect.
Yeah, I think obviously Rucker most likely still out. Ritzy's got to play. I mean, Ritzy's got to bring it like he has so far. Maybe Tyler Thompson, Gibran Harvey get some run, but a guy like Bo Atkinson, I think, can have a big game in this. It's sort of getting that. And we'll see if Des Evans can come through. He's got to stay on side. Every big play, it felt like Des Evans was offsides and caused Ty Adams to get smoked there on the long pass. But sticking on this side of the game or this side of the ball, Greg, the miscommunication stuff that was going on last week is even more concerning than the lack of pressure that they were able to get on James Madison's quarterback. I mean, it's all connected, but that just appeared. It hadn't been an issue all year to that extent. Is that something that can be corrected and fixed in just 1 week? Because Duke's going to do everything that James Madison did to recreate the same scenarios.
Yeah, you would like to think so. And the fact that Carolina did a pretty good job of that in the first 3 games gives you some hope. But again, as Jason said, they haven't faced this type of quarterback yet. This will be the first true test. And not to look ahead, but the kid at Pittsburgh, I don't know if you've watched them. I mean, that team is kind of a mess because Narduzzi is going to Narduzzi. That quarterback is solid. Like, he has a feel for the game that is very impressive. Where did he come from? Alabama. So, the transfer portal taketh away and it also giveth. And so far it seems to be benefiting Duke and Pitt. So that's something to watch this the next 2 weeks. But Jeff Collins seemed to, when media talked to him earlier this week, didn't seem too concerned about it, and that there were some things that, yes, they have to be fixed, but that it was a communication matter that they feel pretty good about clearing up. But you're exactly right. It is this mix of you need to be able to get pressure, and at the same time you need to be able to cover. If you can't get pressure, you better be really good at covering, and you better be really good with communication. You have no other choice. And one thing I will say, I went back and watched the James Madison Charlotte game to see how did Alonzo Barnett have so much success against Carolina, and he didn't against Charlotte. Well, Charlotte doesn't have the best defensive backs, but they were in position time and time and time again. And the few plays that Barnett was able to make, his guys just made football plays against coverage. And that's how they were able to pull away and win that game.
There were times where Carolina wasn't even in the screen.
Exactly. And that's it right there. It's one thing if Dollison is a fast dude. So him breaking away on Des Evans's false start or offsides and outrunning the defensive back and scoring, okay, like it happens. It shouldn't happen, but it happens. The guy's just kind of a freak athlete in terms of his running ability. But some of these other plays, as Jason said, where guys are just running free, that's a completely different matter, and that's what cannot happen. And that's the key thing is the communication's got to be better so you don't have people just running free in the backfield.
Yeah, but a lot needs to be fixed, a lot to watch for Carolina and Duke on that side of the ball. Let's flip it around because this is interesting. You guys were talking about pressure rates, gotten produced, whatever you call it, from the defense. Jason, you said Duke's pressure rate is very similar to Carolina's pressure rate. The tackles for losses numbers are not on the same stratosphere. Duke's got twice as many tackles for losses and more sacks than Carolina. So how is Duke able to get pressure and not only get pressure but get home much more than Carolina's been able to do? And what does Carolina need to do to prevent this, to give Criswell an opportunity? I'll go ahead and say one prediction I've got: Amari and Hampton 25 to 30 carries Saturday, at least. But anyway,
So
what's the challenge for?
You switched out of offense a little too fast.
Duke's
in terms of Duke's offense. One last thing here: Duke's yards per carry on the season. Did you see this one, Greg?
Tell me.
Not good.
3.19 yards per carry on the season against Elon, Northwestern, Connecticut, and Middle Tennessee State.
Yep.
Okay. They averaged 2.19 yards per carry on 27 carries against Elon. 30 carries, 3.1 yards per carry against Northwestern. 39 carries for 3.64 yards against Connecticut. And 35 carries for 3.54 yards per carry. It's a team that cannot run the football, at least so far. That's important. So I wanted to get that in before you get the last bit there, Tommy.
No, you're absolutely right. It's another tale.
They've had 11 runs of more than 10 yards this year in 4 games.
In 4 games. That ain't good, guys. That is a very unexplosive running game. Now, you put Jordan Waters back there. You mentioned that before. You put Jordan Waters back there, that probably changes them quite a bit because their line has been good pass blocking.
Yep.
So this seems to be they don't have a back problem. So this is one of those things where if you're Carolina, I think you can sell out against the pass a little more in this game, and you dare them to run the football to beat you.
There it is. Answer my question now.
So why is it that they're able to get so many tackles for loss?
Why do they produce with their pressure rates, whereas Carolina hasn't produced as much?
Well, a lot
What's
of
the difference?
a lot of their tackles for loss are against the running game. That's really where the difference is. It's more about that. And a lot of that is this is a Manny Diaz defense. And, Manny Diaz is not a perfect coach. He's got his flaws, his limitations, but there's one thing about Manny Diaz is what kind of defense he's going to run. He comes from the Mickey Andrews School of Defense, right? I mean, he learned under Mickey early in his career. And that school of defense is pressure, pressure, pressure. And when in doubt, try more pressure. Right? He's going to now he's gotten a little bit more modern in recent years. You're going to see more cover 7, more stuff happening on the back end. But he's going to crowd the line of scrimmage. And you run the football, and those guys are coming downhill hard. They want to get tackles for loss on 1st and 2nd down, force 3rd down, and then come after your quarterback. That's what he does. And, you go back and you watch the Northwestern game, and Northwestern's running the football, and there's 8 guys coming straight downhill trying to stop the run. Well, I mean, you're going to start getting some tackles for loss if a guy's able to get penetration, and they're turning those guys loose. This is not a wait and see where they're going. It's get upfield and create havoc. He believes in havoc. And so that's been their commitment. Now, the thing is, we've seen in the past when Manny doesn't have the players against a better offense, that can lead to some nuclear results given up, right? We saw that. Carolina did it to him a couple times. But you have to have the players to be able to block him, and then, you can start to get your one-on-one advantages and all that, and you're going to get some big plays. This is one where, Omarion Hampton's probably going to have a few more 1-yard gains and maybe a couple more tackles for loss on him in those 25 carries that you're projecting than normal in this game. But there's also likely to be a long run or two thrown in there because you break the line of scrimmage against what they do, and there's probably some daylight for that guy. Maybe more than normal. So I think that's just the nature of what you're playing against there.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that, and that's what we saw down in Miami several years ago. Is if they missed a tackle early, or if they didn't get home, then guys were running free. And I think Hampton is going to have another big game. But let's talk about Jacoby Criswell, Greg, or you can take Hampton or wherever you want to go. But I think Criswell is important here too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the game at Miami where Carolina had so much success in 2020, I think is noteworthy because if you look at what Duke has done thus far, they've been really good with limiting damage through the air. I mean, they actually lead the ACC in only allowing 20 plays of 10-plus yards passing. And granted, we talked about who they played.
Elon, Northwestern, correct. Connecticut, Middle Tennessee State. There's not a quarterback on that list.
Correct. But they rank top 25 nationally in that stat through 4 games. So that's noteworthy, right? With the rushing attack, though, however, they have allowed 21 run plays of 10-plus yards. So they've allowed more rushing plays of 10 yards than they have passing yards. And I think that goes back to the game in Miami Gardens a few years ago where Carolina was able to gash them. And I don't care who you are, if you can gash a team with the run game, everything falls apart. And I think that's the key for North Carolina is to be able to lean on Omarion Hampton. And we've talked about it. Look, they probably used him more than they needed to because they've needed to. Mm-hmm. And they shouldn't have had to do that this early in the season, but it is what it is. You know what you've got to deal with. You need some of the other guys to get healthy to take some of the load off of him. But I think for North Carolina to win this game, they've got to be able to lean on him and commit to it. Don't put it all on Criswell. And I think that's their path to victory. And I think what we've seen from Duke thus far, there are some avenues there. I mean, Middle Tennessee State's not any good. And while they did gain 168 yards, the first play of the game, I think, or second play of the game, was just a complete bust. And Middle Tennessee State's running back went for 70 yards for a touchdown. So the opportunities are there, but the offensive line has to show up. And they've got to play better than they did last weekend. And if they do, I think they can have some success.
Jason, get in here on Criswell. You've watched him now for a full game. You talked about the pressure that Duke's going to apply and all that. I thought Criswell looked pretty good last week. A couple throws you don't want. Couple, 5 or 6 drops that you can't have. The passing game this weekend, I think Duke's susceptible there. But Carolina, can they make them pay on that? And can Criswell be the guy that takes advantage of Duke's secondary there if he gets time?
That last part is the real key to me. I said coming into the season, I still have some concern, and I still have it. So I said it coming into the season, I still feel this way, that Carolina's tackles in pass pro are still a work in progress. They're young. They're, Trevion has got a lot of talent, but he's still learning how to play that position and still trying to develop the foot quickness really to block some of the quicker guys. And Duke's going to put some guys on the edge that are going to speed rush him. So for my money, a lot of Criswell's success in this game is going to be contingent on three things, really. One is if they're able to run the football with Hampton, then that makes things so much easier for Criswell because he's going to be throwing off play action. You can go hard play action, you can go RPO stuff, and he's making throws with plenty of time into situations that he likes. And then Carolina's going to score some serious points. That's if they're able to run the ball well. If things are a little bit more moderated on that front, and they're not able to run it a bunch and they're depending on him, the other two things come into play, and that is, can they hold up in straight drop back? And the second thing is, are they going to be able to figure out scheme-wise some stuff to get the ball out of his hands quicker? And, and stuff he's comfortable with to be able to take advantage there. So, I've said all along that he has a lot of talent as a quarterback. He's an upper tier potential player in terms of ACC level quarterbacks, and has an NFL arm in terms of velocity and all sorts of things there. He's still got a ways to go in terms of fine tuning some things, but the potential's there. There's just still enough moving parts in the passing game for Carolina that I want to see him do it against a team with a pulse. And this is kind of that first real opportunity in that respect. I want to see, do the receivers get sufficient separation? Is he able to stay upright long enough and to get the ball out quickly enough where he's throwing comfortably and not under pressure? I don't know. I do think coming into this one, I'm looking at this as a, RTDB game. Run the dang ball game to start, and along with some good RPOs based off of that. So if they're going to stack the box like Manny likes to, then throw it behind him, throw that little glance route, throw some of those things, and see if you can take advantage of some of that. But they're going to have to run it to set up some play action for a guy that hasn't played a lot of football yet, even though he's an older guy.
Yeah, and then on special teams, we're not going to go into it, but the bottom line is they got to figure out punt protection on special teams. James Madison just embarrassed them with that, and so that'll be something.
As last year.
Yeah, it is exactly the same. It's load the side and let them run right into you and get a block. We'll see if that gets cleaned up. Return game, kind of hit or miss in that. Jason, anything on special teams other than the same song and dance on punt coverage and all that?
Well, I mean, make sure you have somebody that is prepared to catch the football on any sort of onside kick as well.
Yeah,
you have to make sure. I mean, they actually had a good sense that was coming, but I just you want to have some hands guys a little bit up there against teams that may do that sort of thing. So, and Manny will roll the dice. And this is a rivalry game. Manny comes from the school of thought where rivalry games, you bring a little bit more to the table. So you're going to expect that he's going to try to roll the dice. You got to be prepared for a fake punt. You got to be prepared for, some things in this game because he does believe in that stuff. So, be prepared for this to be a kitchen sink game from Duke's perspective.
If anybody's ever been to a game in Durham, it's always crazy, and there's some crazy stuff that happens. This will be no different. Gentlemen have written their predictions down. I have written my prediction down per a couple people trying to clown me on the message board, but I'm going to talk about congruity. congruityhr.com. Email matt@congruityhr.com. Get your small to mid-sized business assessment. Let them try to help you out and grow your business to be a national brand as they've been able to do with them with the technology support, the customer service, Matt and Darren, and a great crew at Congruity, always willing to help out an Inside Carolina person. So tell them Inside Carolina sent you, get a free assessment and get that done. Grow your business so we can always say shop local and do well. Predictions. All right. I'm going to go first since y'all clowning me. I'm going to do it straight out. I have watched Carolina and Duke play multiple years. I have watched when one team is not any good I've watched when both teams are not any good, and it's always ridiculous. And the last time I was in Wallace Wade, which I hope to be in Wallace Wade this year, don't have tickets yet. We'll probably get them at the last minute. Drake May saved the day. Well, there's no Drake May out there. Even though I think Hampton and Criswell get it done, I'm going Duke 37-35. And it makes me want to throw up to say it. But I have reverted to show me there. Greg, I'll let you go first.
I'm stunned. I really am.
I'm shaking. I mean, I don't know what to think here. I've violated everything in my being to say that. So I hope it's a reverse jinx for our sake, for the message board's sake, for the technology people that support the message boards. I hope it's a reverse.
I think, well, one thing you should go back, everybody watching, go back and look at the handshake between Mack Brown and Manon Diaz after the 2021 game, the 45-42 win in Keenan. It was not good. I don't think there's any lost love there. So that adds an extra component to it, which will make it fun. I agree with Tommy in the sense that it's in Wallace Wade. It'll be a fun atmosphere. The end of the game will be at nighttime, which always makes it exciting. But I really do think that North Carolina with Amari and Hampton has an advantage that Duke just can't match. Malik Murphy's a great prospect. He does not run the ball whatsoever. And some of these games where Carolina slipped up is because they weren't able to handle a dynamic quarterback. Murphy's a great passer. He is not a runner whatsoever. And because of that, I think Jeff Collins will be able to scheme up enough to keep him on his toes a bit and to limit the damage. And because of that, I've got North Carolina winning 31-24.
Nice.
Jason, you're up.
So I've been back and forth on this one. Interestingly, the computers that I tend to look at on this sort of thing, that work through some analytics that I tend to trust, they all favor Duke. All of them. Duke by 3, Duke by 4, etc. But I don't think those analytics have fully priced in Jacoby Criswell at this point. I think they're still operating off of the first 2 games where he's not really featured and not fully up to speed. And the thing I fully agree with you on this, Greg, is that to me the difference in this game is the 3 yards and change per carry from Duke. And Carolina, having gone against actually at least one competent run defense, still averaging some chunk plays and being able to run the football. I think Duke's gonna struggle to run the football. They're gonna get one-dimensional. That is gonna lead to a little bit more pressure than Murphy's been under, and it'll be enough for Carolina to win this game. I think the running game and being able to stop the run ultimately is the biggest difference, because I think Criswell can kind of go throw for throw through most of the game as needed once he's got some running game here. So I also went Carolina, but I went close. Carolina 37, Duke 36. Why? Because I needed something that ended with a 6 here. I know. I saw that. That's why I started laughing. But I went Carolina 37, Duke 36 in this one. I think it should be a close game. I wouldn't be surprised though, Greg, if it did turn out a little bit wider with the stop the run and run the football thing. Partly because if you get the pressure and you create a couple turnovers from Murphy where he's not as comfortable as he's been throwing it back there and you can confuse him, now all of a sudden you're looking at changing the margin a little bit. But I think just on balance, Carolina is a little bit better on both sides of the ball in terms of the defensive line. I think Duke lost a ton on their defensive line last year that gave Carolina a lot of trouble. They don't have those guys walking through the door. I mean, those guys are playing for Texas A&M and Notre Dame this year. And they're playing well for those teams. So, if anything, I might be overestimating in my thoughts here what Duke may score and how close this might be. But I don't trust this North Carolina team. So I think even with that advantage, I'm going to go with this being a super close game and an escape in Wallace Wade.
Tommy, I wanted to say, I know you won Buck's contest of our picks and his, I guess,
Last week.
Yeah.
You're talking about a backdoor cover.
So the funny thing is, if you add up all of our projections together, that was actually closer than any of our individual projections.
Which is actually the wisdom of crowds right there.
Right? There you go.
Yeah. Just take the group. Take the three together. We are more with the sum of our parts than we are individually. I think it's a big game for Carolina football for this season. I don't think it affects next season. It might affect who's in the building and all that. But I think this game shows me, shows the fan base, shows everybody just how last week can or cannot affect things, and how Mack Brown's ability to flip the switch back to a positive vibe around the program is. We'll find out, because I know one thing. Duke wants to beat Carolina's ass worse than anybody in football. And we're going to see, like Jason said, the kitchen sink in Wallace Wade. It should be a lively atmosphere. Shout out to Johnny T-shirt and Congruity. Anything left, fellas, before we get out of here?
I want to echo a comment Jason made on social media last week. Like, the first month of the season was about as boring as you get. And so now that we are finally getting into conference play, we actually can see some legitimate football. We can actually figure out who's actually good outside of the top 10 teams. Now it gets fun. This is when it gets exciting. Well, I guess we do know about Florida State, but otherwise,
we have a pretty good sense of that football team, and it is not pretty.
Started to pull out my Cal football shirt watching that game, just to rub it in you.
I can't believe you actually watched that game, man. I have to watch that stuff because of my my role there. I cover that team, but if I wasn't actually making money to actually do this and like having some, having built brand equity over years to try to, be a part of that sphere, I wouldn't want to be watching that stuff. Like, I can't believe people right now are watching Florida State play football with the way that with how ugly those games are. I mean, Greg, I know you might really like, what was it, 12-9 games?
14-9.
14-9. So 14-9, yeah, they did score that second touchdown. So 14-9 games, you might like that, but there's like ugly 14-9, and then there's right. Good 14-9 where it's just because both defenses are so dominant and it's such a hard hitting game, and then there's that. Yep. That ain't good football, y'all.
Fun fact:
so
Ryan
which was the worst game? I was going to say, what's the worst game?
At least Carolina JMU was exciting.
Wow, is that what that was?
Yeah, last week was a tough weekend for me to cover both teams, because neither game was a pleasurable watch in terms of the quality of play.
I'm getting out of here.
Ryan Coe, what was your comment, Tommy? Ryan
Coe transferred from Carolina to California, missed the field goal. Otherwise, Cal would have had a chip shot to win the game at the end to beat Florida State and send them to 0-4.
Yeah, he missed it, but it was blocked actually. So
it don't matter.
So hey, look, Ryan Coe deserves a little bit more credit. Let's give him what he deserves here.
It was going wide right anyway. I'm getting out of here. Shout out to Johnny T-shirt and Congruity. Shout out to
don't
Jason
say
and
wide
Greg.
right around here.
Wide left, then that works too.
No, not that either.
Kick six, block six. Yeah, that too. Anyway. Shout out to Inside Carolina for covering all this stuff and giving us the opportunity. Taylor Viplis talked to Bryn Renner. That's on the internet. Stay here on the audio version to hear the audio version of Taylor Viplis' conversation with Bryn Renner. And stay tuned to Inside Carolina Live before the Duke Carolina game. I believe that starts at 1 o'clock on Saturday. And stay tuned, as always, for all the beat guys covering it day to day. Thanks, guys.